Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack, back here to bring you Mythic Opulence Healing Guide. Everything you need to know from the healer point of view on getting these bosses down, how we organized our raid cooldowns, and how we ended up downing the counter. Starting it off, I was on the left side for any of these traps. Big mechanic going out, the big difference that comes in from a heroic doesn't really affect healers all that much. It's basically players getting swapped from one side to the other periodically, and that does not happen to any of the healers. So whichever healers are being put onto one side will always be set up and always be going to that side throughout the rest of the encounter. So starting off, you will be having those volatile charges on the left side, dealing quite a bit of damage and eating up a lot of space. That second room that we're going into carries the flame jets. Important to note that this second room specifically only has flame jet doors open on the left side of the room. This is really important from how your camera is angled, your perspective in the room, to be able to dodge volatile charges and other players, and how to best position yourself. So keeping your camera so that it's always going to be able to view the left side of the room was imperative for me in terms of our own survivability. I always wanted to keep distance from our golem to avoid the crushes, and our tanks always were moving them back and away from the group, often moving them into corners of the room to be able to make it easier for everybody else to dodge. Keep in mind, if you're a horde player, your races are getting switched. So as a blood elf, I was turned into a human. So if I was ever hit by a crush, which I would never do, but if I was, I'd be able to get out of it with the human racial that we were given. So keeping that in mind, making sure you're setting up a bind beforehand may just end up saving your life as you're going through progression. The name of the game on this fight is just keeping people alive to get to the end phase. Damage is in so many ways a secondary consideration going into this, and as we meet this, I guess you could say the apex, the turn in the trap room, we really didn't worry that much at all about letting players dropping low to be able to take advantage of the pulse quickening toxin. If they got to that level from any of the volatile charges, great, but we never purposely allowed players to drop low on their own volition, because damage could increase very quickly out of nowhere, and the amount of avoidable damage on the fight was incredibly high. So if they got it, awesome. Some players had strong defensives and were able to stand in extra fire to be able to proc it for their damage, but we frequently found, as you saw there, it can lead to extra deaths that we just did not want to. As you're moving north again from the past, you will have again the lines coming out. The right side is pretty similar in nature to what we had seen previously on Heroic. A lot of the Flames of Punishment, a lot of standing close in on the boss, and a lot of easier traps to be able to deal with there. So mainly it was the left side, I think, was the greater challenge for us. For many of the fire lines, we made sure we just stayed spread out, a lot of times moving them back around the room. And then putting those volatile charges in corners was key for us. So if you didn't have them, you're staying close into the middle of the room. And this room in particular, with the right side flame jets, was an area where we lost a number of different players and kept losing one or two people here and there, enough to cause a wipe consistently. This second flame jet room has all of the doors opening on the right side. So you'll notice I'm always opting to have my camera at least looking slightly towards that right side to see which doors are opening next. And then we always dropped our volatile charges right in front of those doors, which gave all of our players a bit more breathing room to work with. So we'd be able to stand in the middle of that room, avoid the crushes, and avoid any of the flame jets while keeping your camera on. That final flame jet room will lead you to the crown jewels. So there's the amethyst, which gives the holder 50% haste, and any heals they apply will apply 15 seconds, not a full minute on Mythic, but 15 seconds of shadow touched to the target. Now keep in mind that the Thief's Bane, which will kill you if you don't have the shadow touch buff, that hits the player after 30 seconds. So what I did in the group many times was I used Holy Nova, or I held Halo to be able to use it just before the Thief's Bane went off. That way I'd be able to cast it on and hit everybody and make sure that everybody was covered before it ended up going off. The second gem for the healers is the Tailwind Sapphire. Now the holder of the Sapphire does not get any special benefit, but any heals that they apply to either themselves or other players will grant them increased levels of damage. We opted for the Disc Priest to get the increased haste, and then continue to buff up that damage with the Tailwind Sapphire from their other healer. Found it very important and critical even in later parts of the fight, because anytime players were taking shadow damage and they had the shadow touch buff, they would gain dark knowledge, regenerating a ton of mana. So as you're seeing here, as we're wrapping up the golems and starting to burn them down, I'm pretty low on mana, around 20%, but I'm going to be able to get a lot of mana back from a channel mana potion, and then I'm going to regen a ton of mana when the first Whale of Greed comes out. So feel free to be very aggressive with your mana on this encounter, and getting just enough mana to get you to that first Whale of Greed, which should be enough to be able to get your mana bar 50 or 60% filled once again. This fight, the whole focus of the encounter is getting enough people alive, usually everybody alive, to get to the end of the encounter and blow up the boss. The increased damage the disc brings to the table was extremely helpful for that, as not only is it single target nature of burning opulence, but any immediate spot healing requirements for any of the players affected by liquid gold was also very helpful as well here. Got everybody stacked up for liquid golds, or everybody stacked up before liquid golds came out, and then we were using lock gates to be able to push people off onto the pass that we actually ended up coming from, to drop them way outside of the room, and heavy spot healing here was key. Going into that part, we had to deal with the spirits of gold, and from this point there's very little to no damage, so I went all out in terms of dealing it and started spamming Holy Novas with my increased haste. And the more that we were able to burn them down quickly and easily, the less of a headache everybody else ended up having here. So I ended up getting out of the group quickly after that to drop off liquid gold before the Whale of Greed started coming out, and being able to watch your timers for the Whale of Greed. We had so many cooldowns available to us that we just set up a pretty loose priority, because all of the coin showers we pretty much immuned or sacrificed players to be able to deal with, and we didn't have to worry all that much about putting out specific cooldowns to deal with coin shower on top of Whale of Greed. From a healer perspective, all of our focus was on the Whale of Greed, and we brought multiple paladins, and then anytime a player themselves had immunity, they would just use their own personal immunity, and later on in the fight we just started straight sacrificing players rather than dealing with the coin showers, which just dealt an incredible amount of damage, and in fact too much damage for us to really realistically consistently. You're pushing to deal with them later on, you're going to want to have things like Rapture, Barrier, Aura Mastery to be able to cycle through and rotate there as needed. But as I said, in general, we opted to not worry about it at all, and instead focus on just getting players all stacked up before Whale of Greed. And many of the things that will end up dropping players down low are going to be them not affected by Shadow Touch, because it does have such a small duration of 15 seconds. So being able to bank things like Halo before Whale of Greed actually ends up happening, it may result in a lot of overhealing, but it will result in keeping everybody alive because they have that buff. And then the two players with the Amethyst will be then just naturally healing everybody up through ground effects, through targeted healing if they're standing out of the group with their Incandescent Brilliance, and you'll be able to continue refreshing the buff for them later on in the fight. Getting into that end phase with everybody alive is going to be the big goal, and make sure once you kill the boss, start looting any of those extra gold piles, as they do contain BOE. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you all found it useful and helpful. Let me know if you have any questions down in the comments below, and be sure to check out the live stream as well, where we'll be streaming all of our Mythic progression. Thank you for watching, guys. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll catch y'all next time.
This is the Comfort Fit original, reflected in your ears.